Please come to order, and welcome to our budget work session for today, March 2nd, 2021. And I'm now going to turn it over to our Ms. Jeanette Cudmore, who is our money manager. How's that? CFO and our assistant. Thank you very much, both of you, being here today.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'll take my mask off. Gotta get over here. I know. Keep getting looks. It's
That's
like
fine.
talking to
That's
the
fine.
microphone. All right. Well, this is, we're truly going to start off from last week, and as follow-up is how we're going to go into this. And you can see on the agenda, we're starting with follow-up, and we have, health insurance for elected officials, the CIP, the Emergency Services Expansion Project, CIP informational sheet on the RAC project, Veterans Tax Credit, and then Recordation Tax. And then once we finish all of that, we'll go into new info. We'll have the budget revenue summary in detail and the expense summary in detail as it is today. And then we'll start reviewing the Board of Education budget request. So from there, we'll go ahead and turn to page 1. And at this time, I'd like to ask Catherine to come to the front to talk about the retiree health investing. Thank you, Catherine.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon again, Commissioners.
Morning, Catherine. Afternoon, Catherine. Good afternoon now, yeah.
Last week, we introduced the topic of changing the, at least looking at the vesting for retiree health for elected officials. The request was made for a fiscal note. I wanted to provide an update that Bolton has been hired to provide that, and they will have that for the Commissioners next week. What we asked Bolton to consider are to extend the benefit to all local St. Mary's County elected officials, and you'll see on the memo that that includes 11 positions. Some of them have term limits, some of them do not. Okay? And then questions for the Commissioners. After the meeting last week, the request came up to consider providing a benefit for military service for OPEB vesting, and I don't know if the Commissioners want to consider that.
I think since it was my request, what I want to do is, there are two separate issues at hand here, so I don't want to intertwine the two. The 5 years of military service to the vesting schedule is not something new. It's something that was removed previously by boards some time ago, so I want to make sure that it's more of a, how do we reinstate including the 5 years military to the vestment schedule that was previously removed, which the state automatically gives you 5 years into your retirement on the state plan once you've reached 10 years of service. So if you have 10 years of service, you're vested, you automatically get 5 extra years of service. So you're technically at 15 years at 10 years, right? And the prior elected officials, I think, would have to be included in this. But I think with the military service, I think it needs another analysis that can be presented a little bit later in the budget work session when we get to healthcare.
Okay.
So it'll give you a little bit more time to figure out the numbers of how many employees that actually affects and works with them, because I think it's a significant amount.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Okay.
Just trying to clarification. So a county employee works 20, 25, 30 years, and they would get the same vesting after that length of time that one of these elected officials would get after 8 years or 12 years, right?
Currently, elected officials are treated just like county employees.
Okay, but with the new stuff, I guess is what I'm saying. So the county employees would have to work 2 years for every 1 year that the elected officials.
Yes, the proposal is that after 2 terms, the 75-25, and then after 3 terms, 80-20.
Right. But I guess my point is after 8 years, you can get 75-25, and for a county employee to get to that, they've got to be, 25 years? 20 years?
A county employee after 10 years would get a 21% subsidy.
Okay, so it's
So-
probably then it's pretty close then.
75% subsidy is, after 20 years, 20-plus years.
Yeah, the numbers aren't that far off of what, reading this, years of service, counties, percentage, retirees percentage, the numbers aren't too far off versus the 10 and 14-year range.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is if I'm reading this right, the first column says, after 10 years, the county employee pays 78.75%.
Right.
And after 10 years with the elected officials, they'd be paying 25% versus 78.
Correct. That's the proposal.
And then when it goes to 15 years, they would be paying 57.5, and the elected official would pay 20%.
Correct.
Just seems generous for the elected officials versus the everyday employee. Secondly, this would be in perpetuity going forward, and would we have any retrospect going backwards? How far back, if we were to go retrospect, how far are we retroactive?
And that's a question for the commissioners. So are prior elected officials going to be considered, or is this going forward?
I think prior elected officials that are still living should be considered. I mean, if you really look at it, if you go 20 years, I don't think that, unfortunately, we're going to have a large group when it comes down to it. But if they are living, then I think they should be included.
From this group of 11 positions?
No, the prior elected officials.
It'd be 11 plus.
11 plus whatever they are.
But in other words, people that held these 11 positions in the past?
Oh, yes.
As long as they're alive, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if they even want it.
So it would include this board, whatever it did.
It would be starting next term or whatever. The next term,
Would
just
be
like the
retroactive
compensation.
to include this board.
I guess it would include retroactive. Yeah, it'd eventually fall retroactive, yeah. Just like the pay would.
So I guess the question on page 2, or do we have a consensus from the board about the 2 bullets to include 5 years of military service as one, and then to include prior elected officials? Those are the 2 directions we need from the board for an analysis to move forward.
I think that when you look at the state plan, which is what we're trying to compare this to, military service is not part of the state plan for elected officials, if I remember the terms correctly. It could be used for personnel, but elected officials, the way I read the legislation, doesn't include prior military service. So we should try to separate A from B, I
Well,
believe.
it does, because the state retirement system does in fact.
No, for elected officials, different.
Yes, for elected officials. I'm currently dealing with the retirement system and putting together the law enforcement state pension as well as the state portion. And I've done extensive research on it, especially for elected officials in the municipality. So the 5 years military counts. I've spoken to the benefits managers. It doesn't matter whether you're elected or not, you're in the retirement plan. So you get those 5 years. But that point is aside from all of this. This is totally separate. I'm not even looking at the 5 years military service for elected officials. I'm really looking at that for
Okay, so
employees.
separate. Okay, so
Does the
first-
5-year, does that go towards health benefit also, as well as retirement?
Yes.
I know retirement it does.
If you have.
I didn't know health benefit, though,
Right.
also was a part of it.
Right, and it's a matter of policy at that point. So it goes towards your retirement, then it's a matter of policy
So
as to whether or
the
not it
state,
counts.
the state elected officials, they have a 5-year
In the retirement,
service?
right,
So the question is twofold.
it is.
So the question at the table, I believe, from Ms. Pratson, is the 5-year included in the vesting schedule for the elected people?
No, I wouldn't do, well, for, as far as medical benefits, I would say no in this conversation.
Okay, so we just take that off the table.
So let's take it off the table and just go with
For
the
elected
prior elected
officials.
officials.
Yeah, for elected officials. I do want the research done for employees to see how that would affect it. That's my goal, because that was taken away a while ago.
Okay.
And that's back when 10
we have-
years, they were given 100% of
When was that
benefits.
taken away? Was that taken away at some time that, do you know of?
I'd have to go back and look.
Okay, okay.
It's when they were given, it was during Sue Sabo's time.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I don't recall which board it is. I had it written down. But it's when they were given 100% at like 10 or 12 years. They were given 100% of everything, and they were counting the military time into it. So in order to save money back then, because the system was going broke
Okay.
based on the 100% investment, they switched the,
Can we research that,
5 years.
find out, get some background?
We'll try to find out when
appreciate it,
that
okay.
all
Yeah.
changed. I remember when it changed. I
So
just
we'll
don't-
research that, but right now, as far as this, right now, let's look at what we have now, mirroring the president-elected officials at the state level to include prior elected officials.
And for us commissioners, this is part of the budget process. And so I think what Commissioner O'Connor's describing is during the employee compensation and employment, when we're looking at the health insurance for employees.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Understand.
Yeah, because the 5 years count for the retirement. And I think the reason I'm looking at that 5-year military thing is right now, your 5 years military count towards your retirement, but it doesn't count overall towards your medical benefits. So you might get your 5 years, which means you could retire at 20 instead of 25, but you still have to stay till 25 to get your medical. So it's really counterproductive to have it, because you're taking that reduced rate on the medical, because technically you're not fully vested in the medical at 25 years. So if you have that military time, then I want to see what the actual cost is going to be, because if you want to go early at 20, well, one, it is a savings to the plan, because you're not taking the full amount that you would get at 25 years if we're talking about SORP. All right, you're at a reduced rate already. The military counts for a portion of it. But either way, point is, I want to see how that can be incorporated and what that's going to look like.
you
Is
tell
that
me that-
okay with the other commissioners as well, that we reach a consensus to gather that data when we
Yes,
get there?
yes, yes.
So since we're still looking for additional data, should we pull back the motion that was left on the table from last week? Motion?
Now, there's a motion and a second, but it's been tabled. I guess we can table it to the next
It was
meeting.
tabled until now.
Yeah, it can remain tabled till we get all the information.
But let me understand this point so I can clarify it in my head. So you have a position that's not term limited, and people serve 2 terms as a treasurer, or 2 terms as a sheriff, or those people turn around, elect to walk away and do something else. They'll get these retirement benefits for the rest of their life? Or will they wait until their retirement age, 62, 65, 66, whatever the new retirement age is? Do they get it when they turn that age?
So this is another complexity. Currently, in order to be eligible for retiree health, you have to retire.
Yeah, that's what it says.
So in your example, if you were an elected official who chose to work have 2 terms and then walked away, and you were not eligible to retire, you would not be eligible for retiree health.
So again, it gets to be the definition of retired.
Well, there is no retirement in our position.
What'd you say?
You're term limited. There's no retirement.
Well, I agree, Randy.
Yeah.
But I guess my point gets to be understanding how this works. I mean, it's nothing against the younger people, but
Yeah.
younger people could be on this thing for 30, 40 years. You know, if they got out at 40 or,
Oh, you mean if they just pulled 2, like Colvin pulls 2 terms and gets defeated the 3rd term, so he
whatever.
He doesn't get any
Whether it be him or not,
retirement,
or
no
any
health
one of these
benefits, no much.
11 officials. If they leave after 2 terms or leave after a certain amount of time and they're still in their 40s or something, potentially they could live another 30 to 40 years. I mean, do we determine this retirement to be retirement age, or because you cannot, you've walked away from the job? Or in our case, you're term limited and you can't run again. I think that's an important distinction
You're
we need to
defeated
make.
and whatever. Yeah.
Because you start doing those kind of benefits at someone who's in their 40s and they live in, God willing, till their 70s or 80s, this could be a very expensive proposition. The other thing would be
We put an
is,
age limit on who can run for county commissioner.
No,
Over 60 years old to run.
let's not start that,
Jeez.
Commissioner.
That'd be
I think-
counterintuitive,
Why
that's
not?
why I brought
The
this
state's
up.
doing all these things to us. Why can't we do it to ourselves?
What a retired elected official, what determines that criteria? And I think age should be one of them.
So we have a call at 2:30 this afternoon with the person who is the benefit administrator for the state, for the elected officials, so more research is coming.
It's a good thing to find out how they do that.
And in our current scenario, even if the commissioners were to change the subsidy at 2 terms, for example, Commissioner Colvin would not be eligible because of age.
And that's our policy, though.
Currently, you have to retire in order to receive, you have to be eligible to retire under the Maryland pension or the SORP in order to receive retiree health.
Right, as our policy,
That is our current
all
policy.
right, which can be changed, is my point. So we're not eligible now, but if we're going to be looking at this, that policy can be changed by 3 votes.
You better get an actuary to figure that figure in.
Well,
So,
see, actually, okay, at my age now, today, I'm 74.
You know, God rest his
I
soul.
can pull 8 years and get a retirement if I'm under the state system. I think I got to go over 5 years, I get a retirement.
Under the state system,
What is it,
after-
65 or over 65?
after 2011, July 1,
Right.
2011, it is normal retirement.
I just read
the
it too, I'm
early
sorry. I
one,
don't
I'm
know. I
sorry.
put the right name down, yeah.
10 years of service and 65.
10 years and 65.
That's under the state system.
Yeah. I think the big picture that we need to keep in mind here is the main reason for me bringing this forward. We have, typically, the commissioners are not 30 years old, or 32, I think, when I first ran, right? It's an anomaly. Most of the commissioners that have sat behind here are over the age of 55, 60, retired, vested someplace else. They have medical most of the time. Their families gone. So it's a hard decision for somebody to go ahead and say, if I'm a single mother with 2 children working here and I have minimal health care, do I make that decision to go ahead and run for county office, knowing that I'm not going to have anything in the long term leaving where I'm at, but I do want to serve? So the pay was the first step in this for me, where the Compensation Review Board said we're going to raise the wages. Well, we don't all agree on here. Some feel that it's more than enough money. Others don't have the net worth to go ahead and say that. So we have people out there that want to serve, that want to dedicate full-time to doing this job, because while it's technically looked at as a part-time job, you have Tuesdays where we're visibly out to the public. But really, as COVID aside, you're putting a lot of time into this job, a lot of time. I mean, whether it's driving from north to south and fuel and you coming out of your own pocket for the expenses that are there, it's just things that happen with the job. So, and I don't think any commissioner here puts in for the mileage reimbursement that we could put in for driving to all these events. I don't think none of us do. I know I don't. So those are the unknown costs that come with it. So when it comes down to a compensation package, a benefits package to say to the younger generation, the millennial generation, which unfortunately is what can you do for me to a certain extent, but I want to make sure that when people are looking to run for an elected office in this county, that it's equitable for them to do so and advantageous for them to do so. I think it's very, very important. We all know that a wage and medical is a part of that. So that's why I'm bringing this up, that if somebody that's in that position wants to dedicate 12 years of their lives to doing this, then there should be something at the end, or they can make that decision, because if it's just 1 term and gone, so be it. If it's 2 terms, you got to be vested into doing this. The money's got to be there. And I just think there's I think this decision affects, we have 80,000 plus registered voters in this county. That's who this affects. 80+ thousand registered voters, because any one of them can run for this office, and any one of them can go ahead and say, well, you know what, I could do that now because it's not going to affect my family in a negative manner. I mean, I have to work another job. There's no way you could live off of this money supporting a family. It's tough. So, and I feel for people out there that are working every day, 2 jobs. So it's just the way I feel about it. I'm passionate about it. I want to reach out to more people and get them involved in what we're doing. And I think this is a better way to create more competition. I think it's a better way to open up the pool. So that's why I'm doing it. For me, it can take effect for the next board. I don't care. I mean, either way, whatever we got to do to make it so more people have access to get into this office.
Well, let's make sure that we understand that if we make it retroactive, it may take effect with the next board, but it's going to affect this board too. So what we're doing is self-serving, in my opinion. While it is important that we do get good people to run, I think one of the incentives is if you're successful in running, you do get 85-15, which nobody gives. And you do get this opportunity to come in, required monthly or yearly a number of meetings. I think it's 40 or whatever we're required to have as far as our meeting schedules. But this job's what you make of it. And different ones of us make different things for each individual as they feel comfortable. But the key gets to be is this cost. I mean, you get someone who, God forbid, Eddie Bailey, wonderful man, but he was fighting cancer for the past 20 years. And not so much Eddie, but anybody who has a long-term debilitating illness. I remember from my days on the school board, it was very expensive to keep those things going. Mm-hmm. So I can't support something that would benefit me if I'm making a decision. If it makes the decision going forward, and I tend to be part of it, that's a different story because people have a chance to see if they, but to do something to make it retroactive, so it includes me, I think it's self-serving. The other part gets to be, granted, we do need people to run for these jobs. And it's expensive proposition, it takes a lot of time, but it comes with the territory. There's no hidden fees involved in this. We know what we got to do. So I can't support giving it below 65 or whatever the state pension recommends.
I think from Commissioner O'Connor's and your point of view, it represents a tool in the toolkit. It's an option. You don't have to take it if you don't want it. It's there. So from Commissioner Guy's point of view, my point of view, I got Blue Cross Blue Shield. He has Champus and TRICARE. It's an option.
Yeah, it's only benefits you if you take it. So, I mean, if you don't want it, then you can go on the record saying you don't want it, and then it doesn't benefit you. It's the same thing with thinking pay is too much. If you don't want the pay, donate it. To me, it's more of an obstacle to some people's ways of serving. It is an expensive proposition, and not everybody has the means to do it. But they have the intelligence, they have the motivation. And when they get here, they can start to build from there. So I think that giving other people opportunities to do this versus, unfortunately, how it's been for the last however many years, 20+ years, I mean, I think that's a great thing.
I think it's a tool in the toolkit. I'd like to also try to find out when our legislators, the delegates and the senators, when did their program start that they've got now? Like, and how did it get started? Did they vote on it themselves? Or
Yes.
They did?
Yes.
Okay. But it'd be nice to know when they started this, how long it's been, and we got a lot of people up there that are very young, believe me, and it carries on a long time. So I think it's been a good tool in the toolbox. I got to admit, I don't really personally need it myself, but to attract other people to come into this job, we need to look at this very seriously. Okay, so we're going to maintain right now the motion we had last week. We'll just carry it on to next. We'll get more information. Because you're going to bring to us the information on cost, right, for next week. And more information you're going to gather today when you talk to the state.
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Yep.
You'll be able to probably answer a lot of answers right there. Okay. Any other questions, Commissioners? Good. Moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Catherine. All right, Commissioners, we're going to turn to page 3. And this was the update to the Emergency Communications Center expansion project. I know we have Steve Walker here and John Diedrich, and actually the biggest change in this project is the reduction of the contingency. It went to 5%, and the project actually has been reduced by $417,450 compared to the version that you saw last week. We do have more info in here, a lot of detail, the breakdown of the project, and I think one of them is coming up, or who wants to come?
Probably have the details from Gary.
Okay.
Thanks, John. So we're on page 3, and that's where the updated CIP sheet is.
Good afternoon. So in this package, we included an amended CIP sheet, and Ms. Cudmore has already reviewed what we changed on that. We brought it in line with the CIP guidelines, and we also revised the square footage unit cost based on going back through the source, which was District 4, looking at how realistic that was and applying it to this project, and adjusted that unit price. Building program summary, that was something we put together, our department, in order to explain each use in the building, and you can kind of go through that, and it's a lot of detail, but it's really critical that all those uses are in close proximity with each other, especially if the building's locked down or whatever. Risk category table, it's really kind of a building permit.
So, excuse me, John. So what you were talking about, this summary schedule, that's on page 5.
Right. Right, and then the risk category table, that's page 7, goes through what you need to do to meet the building code requirements based on given risk that a building has to sustain. And this particular one, as you know, is the highest category. And there are some photographs of existing workspaces, but we didn't include those in the package. They basically show how squeezed people are right now, like Gerald Gardner's got somebody else, Amy's got to sit in his office. Not Amy, I'm blanking her name, but she has to sit in his office. There's no other place for her to sit. They've got plexiglass partitions, but it's pretty cramped, and there's no room to spread things out, except in the Emergency Operations Center itself, which is really the only conference room. The space needs study was included because we wanted to respond to your request to look to see what other spaces might be available on campus. It does look like in 2 years, the old Garvey building will be available. Again, it's not a great place to put people permanently, but it would be an excellent resource for swing space during the actual renovation when we go through all this constructing and deconstructing.
And Commissioners, the proposed space needs allocation was approved by the Commissioners in July of 20, just about 7 months ago. We have a meeting, I think, on Friday to update. So we look at this based on space now about every 6 months. So we'll bring any updates that we have as well.
I actually just have some questions for Mr. Walker, if he doesn't mind.
Yes, sir.
So, just a question, statement one, I know we have a lot of moving parts, and your space needs are going to go through the roof. Okay. So acknowledging that, last budget work session may have been nearsighted to start talking about how we can move people in your one building to other buildings, so I'm going to acknowledge that as well. But the other portion I would like to know here is there any particular reason the design is to build a shell around the building and then take down the walls inside the building versus just building a wing out? Because that's how it was described to us, is we have a building, and we're going to build a building around the building, and then work from the inside out.
So I'm not sure if there's enough space to build a wing. I mean, we could try that, but I can go through some of the descriptions. So, I mean, I think everybody's been into our building, and you walk into the main hall, and of course, then you go into the communications room. Off to the right is our EOC. That's clearly not big enough, and we are seeing that even more so in COVID when we're trying to do some meetings, and we really have a limit of about 12 or 13, I think is what it is. So one of the issues of that EOC is there's a lot of competition for space. We have training sessions, we have meetings, and we've reduced them, but we still have all these different needs for that. When we do interviews for new candidates, we do that. So there's a lot of competing space. So the plan is to push the back wall out to make that bigger. My office, which is off of it, would go back further, and the admin staff up front would then come right in front of me, so that my admin staff would be right next to me. And then over in the corner, again, the communications personnel meets daily in the EOC. They have no office space. They have no place to really meet with their personnel, supervisors. So if we were to close that building off on the end, then they have an office to do, and they have a training room. So that's that end of the building. On the front right, as you face it, there's a lot of electrical equipment underneath the ground, and we thought we couldn't build there. We possibly could, but that's quite a more expense to do that. But on the other side of the building, along where the break area is, to the right, we talked about squaring that off to add additional offices and a training room, which then will alleviate some of that space need in the EOC, because training room, it's another meeting room for us. Public Works suggested taking the building out to the roadway. That would certainly do it. One of the things that I would like to have in the front of the building is an area that's a secure area that people come into. Right now, yeah, we let them in, but I need somebody as a receptionist to sit there. So that's kind of it really in a nutshell, and we could get into a lot deeper.
Well,
But-
yeah, I mean, that's my question. We're paying a significant amount of money for 2,300 square feet, and if you were to look at that little roadway that's right there, if you were to come straight out, I mean, you'd get more than 2,000 square feet. I mean, if you think about it. So,
Actually, I think that's supposed to already be a part of that. That was what Public Works has suggested, we come out and take some of that roadway right off the
yeah,
bat.
I think that was a part of what we were discussing last week was instead of building a shell over a shell. So I'm just trying to figure out ways to get this cost down. If I know it's got to be hardened, so there's going to be a significant cost, but building a building over a building is going to be way more expensive than extending out. So that's what
I mean, we could also take a look at going up. Apparently, you know, I've been told by the old timers that was part of the plan originally, to maybe go upwards, you know, maybe put the admin upstairs. And again, I don't know, I'm open to any idea, certainly, but we certainly, as you said, we're getting ready to continue to
you need the
expand.
space. I'd just like to see more options, maybe. Is that the way I'm looking at it? I mean, I don't know if that's, if this is time sensitive, but I just,
Let me ask, what could you do, instead of this, what can you use with the backup EOC?
Well, then, you know, there's some discussion on if EMS comes to fruition, that may be used for some of that. In the EOC,
We can look down, I'm using a specific example as you have the
Right.
backup. Why can we use the backup versus worrying about something that could happen in 10 years?
so in the backup center, what's available right now is you have one office that's very small, that right now is being used for medical supply storage. You have another one that's a little bit bigger that's not being used. Then you have another smaller one that's not being used. And then you have an office. presumably, if we ever have to shut down, that's where I will have to work out of. So you have 3 spaces that can be used, that's it. There's nothing else. Everything else is being used by dispatch in some way. There's one office down there that is used for Civil Air Patrol communications. It has a lot of equipment in there, we don't use it, but if everything else fails, that's what that's for, that's part of emergency management. There just isn't, one of the things I had considered, we need to clean it up a bit, but I'd like to give a tour to all of you so you see exactly what it looks like down there. Because
seen
I
it.
think that's important.
The stairway is crazy.
Stairway's crazy. There is some plans by building services to put a new chairlift. We have a back entrance that is a bit of a stairwell, but you're right, it's a bit, but again, it's an important building because we have to have a backup. It's protected, it's good, but, you know, what are we going to use? There's a little bit of a space, but not a lot.
All right.
I could probably push 2 to 3 people down there.
But
for
these
my
plans,
current-
we don't have plans on this, right? This is for the A&E, so, okay, so this is for the A&E, right? This
Yeah,
is what.
right.
Okay, so we can get,
We could redesign. We could do that if you want to do that.
is it you redesign or is it the firm redesigning?
We really, I mean, we're just telling ideas on what we want, and we're
Okay.
you know,
All right.
so.
So that makes a big difference here. So when the firm actually comes in for the A&E, they'll be able to give you some options that say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, and those will be presented for the final building. Okay, all right, that makes a lot more sense to me than this. It was presented that this is the plan on,
I'm open to anything that gives me more space and more usability.
okay,
If it goes up, if it builds a wing, it doesn't matter, as long as we can fit what we need to do. But there are some very specific needs.
okay, all right, good.
And
Thank
we
you.
also, you know, if you have to have large meetings, you've got the building next door. So they don't use that back conference room, the Chesapeake building at all, or the Potomac building. On the first floor in the back.
Room 14,
I don't know what the number is.
we have used it on occasion.
I don't think that room gets a lot of use, so I'm just providing that as an option.
I'm just more comfortable knowing this is about, we're going to get different plans coming back.
I'm more than, again, I'm open to anything that gives us more usability, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker.
And Commissioners, this is actually starts, the new funding is in 2023, a year from now.
Right.
So it's not in the 22, so we have time
Yeah,
to change and update the project.
Thank you. Anything else, Commissioners?
So Commissioners, this is one of your approval points. If you're comfortable with the change in the page number 3, the CIP sheet, so that Finance can move it into the final CIP draft budget book.
Right, and we also take this, we needed to know the day, so we can take it to the Planning
This
Commission.
reduction of the 417,000 you're talking about right now?
Right,
Okay.
right, we go to the Planning Commission on Monday night, so we
I'm
have to.
fine with that. I have no problem with
Is
it.
everybody fine with it?
Good.
We're good.
All right, thank you. So with that, we will go to, I think, page 10. Page 10 is the one-page update that talks about the RAC project that was requested from Commissioner O'Connor last week.
And Commissioners, we'll make this available as a single sheet as well, so you can use this for promotional opportunities.
Thank you.
So once this place is built, we'll be able to make charcuterie boards like on that picture?
Yes, you will. Oh, yes, they will.
Yes.
Their teaching kitchen.
They will, they will.
Very good.
That's very nice, yeah.
So your question on this one is we're still going forth with the 2.7 million, and
Was there a question on this?
was there a question on this one? Good.
Right, this project is in here, it's on page 29 of last week's package, page 29, and it's totaling right now about $2.7 million.
So there is no question.
It's no decision point for today,
That's a better
Commissioners.
term.
Right, thank you.
Just information.
Just information.
Thank you.
All right, we will move forward. And it looks like we're looking at page 11. And this is follow-up to the property tax credits that were for veterans from last week. We've brought you back more information, and I believe Neil is here. Neil?
Yep, we'll check and see if he's outside.
Is Miss Kelly here?
Here he is.
No, she's not here. Welcome.
Hi again, everybody.
All right.
Welcome back.
So we'll start on page 11. We brought back a number of things for you. Based on what the information we provided, this is the Veterans Ordinance from Anne Arundel County. And this is based on the 9.9-265. The estimate is up to, on our calculation last week, was the $1.5 million. So I think Anne Arundel County is the only county that's now adopted that new credit. So that's on page 11, 12 through 14. Okay? Then on page 15, we go into the updated memo from legal, which is, goes over in more detail of what was presented last week. And that's starting on page 15.
Some big numbers here.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
$1,816,000.
right. And
I
it-
wanted to say that you got that 20 cents on the end.
Yeah.
every little bit helps.
I'm with you. I agree, Finance Officer. Thank you.
Now, was this the same one that last week the treasurer said she would need an additional person if implemented also?
Right.
Yes.
If we were to add these additional credits, yes, she
If
would
full-
need help.
If we added all of them.
Right, and we would have to get more info from her, but I mean, she would probably need help because they're looking in detail at each individual person to determine what is the best credit for the citizen.
Right.
And there's a lot of work to it, and it's pretty much a full-time job, probably looking at each, determining.
With that said, that's what people have said to me. Right now, I know there's at least 2, if not 3, and you can only take advantage of one. And the question gets to be, which one's the best one for me, Mike? And I said, I don't know. You have to,
Right.
who do you go ask?
The treasurer's office.
Okay, so they should be able to do an analysis for these people.
They will
and
look
say,
at all the individual's information, what's on the application that they file, and what they provide to the treasurer's office to help in calculating. And it also looks at their individual circumstances.
Okay, so with
And they do that
said,
now with the senior tax credit. There's like 3 different ones, and
Correct.
you only choose one.
Right,
This will be 4, right? This will be 3?
right. We have a senior tax credit, cap, and then we have a matching senior tax credit. And of course, then we have the local, the tax for the homestead, homeowner's tax credit, and the 6510 tax credit, which is the one for veterans right now that we do have.
Do we know what another employee plus benefits will cost us over at the treasurer's office?
I think it was about 70,000, I think the number, with fully loaded position.
And Commissioner Hewitt, that's on the bottom of page 20, and it is 70,000. Ms. Cudmore.
And also to clarify, right now, while there are 2 tax credits, one of them is an entire exemption, so they're exempt from paying taxes. So it's not really which one is better than the other. It's if you qualify for the exemption, you're obviously going to take the exemption because then you don't have to pay property taxes at all, whereas the 6510 is just a 10% credit.
Right.
But these ones, that's to Jeanette's point, is that because there would be additional considerations, we would need or the treasurer's office would need a third person, or an extra person, sorry.
My question here is, I'm reading the ordinance, right, the amended ordinance? Why, where do we get the age 65 for the surviving member?
That's from the statute itself.
Right.
Okay, so you have to, from the actual statute.
Right, so that's exactly right. So there's a surviving spouse who's over 65, and then there's a surviving spouse who's under 65. But that would be for somebody who's active duty and has a permanent or non-permanent disability. So there's
So-
two different types of surviving spouses.
Right, so that's what I want to make sure, because it's the way this draft ordinance is written, it says, I don't see it, but it doesn't have the under.
Oh, it's in letter E. So eligible individual would be, so the draft ordinance, page 23, for the record, would be under section 276/76, subsection A is definitions.
Right.
And then subsection 2 is eligible individual, and then all the way at the bottom would be a surviving spouse of an individual described under item D, which would be an individual who's active duty, retired or honorably discharged. So that means they don't have to be, there's no age limit for that person.
Yeah, that's, they come, if somebody comes back.
For sure, absolutely.
And, they're married, some of these.
20 years old,
Right, some of these injuries that are coming
Absolutely.
and diseases are not,
100%.
you're not going to make it to 65.
Right.
I mean, Randy's 74 now, and he's lucky because he was over in Vietnam. I mean,
I don't get no credit though.
yeah, I know.
I make too much money.
Yeah, it is.
This high pay I get,
Are you 74 today?
74 today.
Yeah.
Happy,
And you
happy.
dealt with all the Agent Orange and everything, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, that's, anyway,
I got 25% disability is all I got.
yeah.
I don't qualify for
The
anything.
rhetorical question is, how many tax credits can you keep giving? At the end of the day, we managed to find more and more tax credits along the way. There's the loss of revenue, and the other side, you got to make up that revenue somewhere with all the other demands. As I said earlier, the gist of it here is over $2 million in tax credits, and I mean, we are, people may not like this, we're the most generous county in the state when it comes to giving tax credits, and we've said that and done the analysis for 7 or 8 years right now.
Exactly.
And I don't see how you can just keep piling more credits on, because once you give the credit, you got to make up the revenue on the other side of the street. There's just no other mathematical way to get there. We can't be Annapolis, and this is a forced error, not an unforced error. This is not a This is not this isn't something Annapolis is pushing down on us. This is something we have to adopt and make a decision to make a forced error and unforced error for the amount of money, and recognizing what the demand is on the system right now and will be on the system going into the future. That's just the business financial side of it, with trying to remove the emotion.
What's the,
Forced error, but I would say this. It's more about what are we fixing by doing this? We have 2 already. Who's being left behind by those 2? Are we taking a group that's cannot take advantage of the existing ones?
well, I would say yes, if you read over them, because every single applicable one is for seniors, or 40 years in the county, or a certain amount of time, right?
Right now, tax credits we have right now
Right.
for real estate is for elderly.
Yeah.
Correct. The only thing we have for veterans, if you're 100% disabled,
Yeah, 100%.
The only thing we have right now.
100% and permanent.
and permanent, 100% and permanent, correct?
Who's left out?
Is that what we have, 100% and
We
perfect?
do have the Maryland Homeowners Property Tax Credit, which does not have, that doesn't not pertain to age at all. That's really a sliding scale based on income.
Yeah, it's the homestead.
Based on
right?
income.
Right.
And the senior tax credits we have now are also based on income.
Income and
Yeah.
age, right, for the seniors.
Income and age, right.
Yes,
And this would be income and your percentage of how you got messed up in the military.
right.
Now,
And
all this right here you got right now, is just based on income also for the,
There's an income stipulation.
Yeah, there's an income, you have to make less than 100,000.
okay, so there's the income bracket on this, and disability percentage,
Right.
as determined by the VA.
Yeah. So my question would be is, I think if there's a phased-in way of doing this versus going all in to see how it is, that would be more so where I would go is, the limiting factor, if you're looking at 50%, okay, that's 75 to 99, but you can, if I'm correct, you can add 2, but you can't take away. So if you want to give everybody that is 50 to 99, 25%, would you be able to do that? Because you can give up to 50% for the rest. So if we say we don't want to give 50%, we want to do 25% for 75% to 99%.
I see what you mean.
So the percentages that are in here now, Neil, I think that's based
Right.
on what
I see what
was
you're-
the legislation had defined.
So your question is, can you, for those 75 to 99, just do 25%? Basically
Right.
reverse the numbers
Well, yeah, keep it at 25% for both groups.
of them?
Right. From 50% to 99%, 25%. Is that 50% absolute?
think that number comes from the statute.
Statutes, come on.
Yeah. I think it actually describes it as is equal to 50%. I don't think that it's an up to, but I can double check, but I'm pretty certain that it's 50%, that it's maybe non-negotiable at that point.
And if I remember correctly, while it was enabling legislation, the only county that took advantage of this is Anne Arundel at the present time.
That's exactly
At this time.
At this time, that's correct.
And I haven't heard of any, in the MACO discussions, I haven't heard anybody, have you, jumping up and down for this?
I'm the only one who jumps up and down for any tax credits for,
Yeah, you haven't heard?
I'm the only one out of 24 jurisdictions that will stand up and fight for veterans. The
And
other
I
24 jurisdictions just sit silent.
Well, nobody else,
23 don't get it.
nobody else really
No.
wants to do it. It was a fight to get the first one.
Okay, Commissioner, what else do we need to even look at this any further? We need anything more information from staff here before we,
Well, I mean, the question is, so we can't say 25%. You're saying, no, we
That's what I
can't change
think.
the percentage
I
to
can
be less than.
double
it has to be 50%?
That's my understanding, but I can double check within 5 minutes.
But,
Actually, I might even be able to check on my phone.
well, you know what, that's illogical. You know why? Because if you're 75 to 99%, that means you're already 50 to 74%, so you'd be eligible for the 25%.
Oh, true.
So
Right.
I answered my own question. So you don't have to worry about changing the percentage because you already fall into that percentage group. If you're there, you just don't offer the 50%, you offer the 25%. So I want to know if it was 25% versus the 50% and the 25%, what would the impact be, the financial impact?
We would have to come back with that.
So I think,
We're starting to talk real numbers.
Yeah, we're getting into millions of dollars.
This is
Right.
real money. This is.
I wanna know.
Like I always say, when you get
Get
to
two
seven
others
numbers
to
like
go
that.
with you.
so the way that I did it is on page 20, and there are a couple of assumptions that had to be made. The way that the Veterans Administration does their, divides up disability rating is on the digits of 10 rather than the half digits. So I'm not, why Annapolis chose to do it 75% to 99% or 25 to 74, I'm not entirely sure.
They don't do it like that, so
Right,
that's,
because it makes it slightly complicated because you're unable to track the actual numbers as easily, so you kind of had to make estimates. But on page 20, there describes the number of veterans that have a certain disability range, and I did 50 to 60, because I was the closest to, that I could get to 50 to 74%. And then, which slightly underestimates it, obviously, and then 888 for 70 to 90, which overestimates slightly. So then, in each one, it shows the number of people or the amount that would be expended. For the 25%, it would be 419,000, and then for the 70 to 90, which would include the 99% because it's inclusive, would be 1.1 basically.
So we're at 1.5 million for this amendment.
That's right.
Yes.
well,
If you
no,
adopt
because
the-
you calculated 50%.
It's slightly off, but yeah, the numbers
close.
are, it's,
Yeah, it's a 50% tax bracket. So I mean, if you actually did 682 and 888, the total of those two at 25%, you're probably going to be below $1 million.
yeah, but I guess the important part is that it's probably a lot to miss.
We're assuming too that we're not sure how, this assumption that all these veterans are less than $100,000 a year.
That's exactly
Are
right.
they
So the number
actually
of-
going to
yeah,
apply?
Another big assumption right now.
Right, are they going to actually all apply?
Yeah,
Right.
Because we weren't able to
they all
get the
qualify.
data on how much
Here
they
in
make.
present day, not future.
That's right,
This future carries forward.
right.
Right.
I think that's the key factor is the $100,000.
Right.
And can we change that 100, say to 75,000 or under?
So the way that the
qualified.
statute is written is 100,000. There may be additional criteria that could be added, but that's how the statute's written.
Yeah.
So to the commissioner's points is that it is both Commissioner O'Connor as well as Commissioner Guy and Commissioner Morgan, it is a high higher estimate than is probably, it's less realistic because there's not
We
every
don't know how
veteran
many are actually
less than
making 100,000 or more.
$100,000
Yeah.
makes more than 100,000, and the numbers are slightly off. But it's just to sort of give you an idea, is the best that we could come up with the limited and sometimes off data that we have.
But you've got here numbers, you have 682 and 888.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to find out the income range of those people? Is it possible? Do we know that?
That's going to be tough.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's
I'm not sure.
codified.
Huh?
It's going to be tough to find out the
Yeah,
income, but I
yeah.
mean, we had to do the same thing with the senior tax credits, but because of the size of the number, we're not pressed on time for this ordinance, are we, Ms. Cudmore?
We would need to take it to our public hearing or another public hearing prior to, so we would really need to have it for the recommended budget to be included in the April
Well, of course.
public
but
hearing.
My point is that we could set this to the side to have you do the math on 25% of the total number to give us the hard number on what that would be, right?
Yes, correct. I mean,
I don't want to do the math sitting here and have the wrong number, is my point, and there needs to be a skew for the $100,000. So I don't know how you do that, but if you can compare it to other things, because what this really affects is the veterans that, they're receiving the disability payment and they're working a job and they're not making that much money. But that's what it affects, so.
right.
But there's 2 points, I think. First of all, it doesn't have to be taken, we don't have to do it this year,
Correct.
because it's there. B, we have no idea what's coming down the road, or what we're, as I said this one, we're down 10 million going in, my guess, close enough, ballpark. We added this being down 10, or whatever it is, add another million, and you're down 11, and you got Annapolis coming down the road with who knows whatever, and you got to figure out how to balance the budget by, the end of April, May.
I mean, the other option is to look at the tax credits that we already give, find the one that is not being used as much, remove that tax credit, and replace it with this one, or a combination thereof.
Well, if you look at the one, the page 20 from last week, we're using all the credits.
Yeah, we're using all the credits out there.
Everybody's using something.
So the one credit, the tax property subsection 9-258 is actually increasing the eligibility to the existing credit that we have, the 6510. And that one does cost about $272,000.
And that's summarized on page 21?
Yes.
Where it's adding that extension.
Right.
That you're describing.
Exactly. So that's the one that we're currently doing. And they've provided an extension
You're
or
currently
increased
doing
the
the
eligibility.
6510 now.
Right.
I also think there's two ways to look at this, which is the negative side or the pessimistic side, but then the optimistic side. Because if you tell a veteran that's making less money that they can buy a home and their mortgage is actually going to be lower because they're not having to pay all those tax rates, they're actually going to buy a home. Whether that home is a $300,000 home or a $200,000 home, you also have the ability to say, hey, you're going to use your VA home loan, which you're guaranteed pretty much to get if you have that, plus the tax incentive helps. So our housing market's booming, so this is an opportunity to buy a home with a lower mortgage, which can fit into their actual earnings bracket. So when we look at it that way, if we get rid of, and I don't want to be flippant about the number, let's say it's $600,000, what's going to be the turn or return on that investment into our housing market? And how many of these veterans actually even own a home right now? So we're looking at this number, 888, but do they own a home or are they renting? Because there's 888 veterans in the county, but I know that there's a ton that rent. So how do we bracket this number down? That number is skewed. Mm-hmm. So I think there needs to be some more drilling down into this and see what the return on investment is for these types of credits. And for the record, I am a disabled veteran, but this does not affect me in any way whatsoever. So
It doesn't affect me either.
just because it was mentioned last time. So I just want to make sure for the record that
And I know we're talking about the Article 9-265 authorizing us to do this. I'm wondering if are we held totally to the bill and the article as far as the amount of the gross income?
So the AGI is not less than, or not more than $100,000.
I know, but can we adjust the AGI even down further
Oh.
as a county government? Are we held liable to the 9-265 as far as holding it at 100,000?
That have to be checked, that's
Can you-
kind of.
I guess the old, can you
Sure.
add to but not take away?
Right,
Yeah.
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 Well, the gist of it is, if when you add number 3, section 9-265, you basically double the tax credit in the county. It's that simple.
You're right.
Well,
And that's also revenue that has to be made. You have to make it up somewhere.
well, you don't double anything. I think that's an unfair argument. You know, when it comes to numbers, I'll agree, but when you can't use 888 because not all 888 actually own a home. I mean, that's not a fair number. So you have to look at it from a different perspective. But I think that,
We would have to check and see what the Veterans Administration or
If
who
they
would
have
have
that
that
data.
information if we
And
can
they
drill
would.
down any further.
they would have it. The Veterans Administration would have it. So I think it's just needs some more research,
Sure.
but it's worth delving into.
Okay. And then, of course, that other credit, that's the extension of the 6510 that we have. That detail, again, is on page 15, where it extends the eligibility to military personnel under the age of 65 with a service-connected disability who are active duty, retired, honorably discharged members of the uniformed services, surviving spouses who have a service-connected disability. They're also under the age of 65 and have not remarried. And a surviving spouse who is at least 65 years old and has not remarried. So that expands the current credit that we already have, and that one costs $272,000.
Yeah. Well, either way, I think there's some more research that just needs to be done. If you could do that, and bring
Absolutely.
it back to see what we got,
My
get a more
pleasure.
realistic number, not 888, because,
Right, unfortunately, the way that the legislature decided to break it up and the way that the data is, there are a number of assumptions that had to be made because I got my information from the Veterans Administration,
the state or the,
the U.S. Veterans Administration.
oh, you got to call the state.
Okay,
You got to call the state veterans. They got all the information.
okay, sure, I'll give them a
Right.
call.
Check with Secretary Owen's
Yeah.
office up in Annapolis and see if he can supply that information.
Certainly, will do, thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
So for now, Commissioners, it's safe to say no direction on the Veterans Disability Tax Credit. We'll bring back additional information.
Correct.
All righty?
Yeah. The state veteran.
Of course.
That will be follow-up next week.
Okay?
Okay?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Neil.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, Commissioners, more follow-up on page 25 on the recordation tax for fire and rescue that have been paid over the years. I received the information from the deputy clerk of the court, and the listing on page 25 is all the different loans and fire and rescues that have been applied for, and it actually goes back, there's one from 2001, and it totals $215,816
So, Mr.
if you were to provide credits back.
Right, and we have the ability to provide this back to these departments.
We can cut checks to each one of these, yes.
So this came up
What?
in 2nd
I
District.
said that's great.
Oh, you did?
That's all I was saying. This is from when we brought it up the first time. I mean,
So this came up when 2nd District, for anyone watching, when they reached out to me because of their $84,000 recordation tax bill. And so I brought it up, and it wasn't the right time. And I do want to thank the commissioners, because I think now is the right time for entertaining this motion. But I want to make the motion that we return the $215,816 from recordation tax to the various departments that have paid it.
Second, discussion. Thank you very much, because I never had a problem with the 84,000. It was always the fairness to the other people who've already paid it. So thank you for doing this research, and I'm all about giving it back. But the thing gets to me is that going forward, I think what would be important is if these people knew they didn't have to pay this, their loans wouldn't be as high. Therefore, their repayment wouldn't be as much. So it's one thing to say, hey, look, by the way, you made the loan, here's your 84 back. Maybe they have something they need.
Right.
But the more responsible way to do it would be to say, you're not going to be subject to this tax.
Well, so the key there gets to be whether or not Annapolis can change the law Because I don't know that we can change the law, but we
Well, that's
can
what-
put the policy in effect.
We would have to get the recordation tax ordinance amended.
Well, I mean, is it also just that, or if they're tax exempt, should they be paying it anyway? I mean, if they're already a tax exempt organization,
We have to look at the ordinance,
Right.
because the ordinance, the clerk's office has the ordinance, and they're the ones that are applying what's in the ordinance to what they're collecting.
Well, the recordation tax only applies to private loans. It has nothing to do with loans from the county or state. It's just
Right.
private loans that they have.
Right, county
Do
property
we
or
need
county is
legislation to
exempt.
change that ruling is probably the thing.
Well, that would be
But
the
we
thing
should
need
pull,
research on.
yeah, we'll pull that ordinance and we'll review it.
I'm sorry. to interrupt.
We'll pull the ordinance and review it with legal and see how it can be corrected going forward.
Again, what can we do locally and what we need help on if we need to go to Annapolis?
Correct,
But I think the key, we all understand, these volunteer departments, we want them to succeed.
yes.
So whatever we can do to help them, yeah, we're all for that.
I think we're all for that,
Yes,
Commissioner. I mean, the thing of it is now we need to look at what law needs to be changed.
Tell me though, on recordation taxes, does that go towards Project Open Space funding, or, I thought it did.
It's split into, it's like $4 per $500 of value. That $4 is split 3.65 goes to the general fund, and then .35 is actually dedicated to ag land preservation projects.
Okay.
So I would say that we would take this out of the general fund portion and not impact.
No, I understand, but let's understand what the impact would be is if we took it out of the Project Open Space, because is that by law, we have to fund that Project Open Space?
That's a part of, I think, your latest version of your recordation tax, and you were able to do that. I don't think that required legislation. That was a designation made by the commissioners.
Again, when we're taking it, if we're going into general fund, hey, look, I'm all about giving
Right.
it back. But if it's going into Project Open Space, we need to know the impacts if we're not going to be putting there anymore.
Right, and that would just impact your funding to the ag land preservation projects, because we could use that money toward their project as a funding source.
All right, well, you have a motion and a second, Commissioner President.
We were looking at this, one more discussion. Got anybody looking at this as far as changing the law? I thought last time we talked about
Did ask
the
them
General
to-
Assembly.
We
Did
did
we
ask
not?
them to do that.
Is that being done now? Do we know?
So I think you're right, and I know Neil's not here, but I'll check on legislative update on that.
Yeah,
for
know where
that.
we are.
Right, I got you.
For future use, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
All righty, well, thank you, and we'll get with legal and review the ordinance.
We got a motion and a
And-
second.
Vote, though.
Well,
We gotta-
need a vote.
Okay, right now we have a motion, a second to, would you please read that to me?
Sure, it was reimburse the recordation tax of the $215,816 to the various departments as described on page 25.
And we have a first, second, all in favor? Aye. Looks like ayes got it, 100%.
Thank you very much. All righty.
All right.
Now we're on to going into new stuff, right? Yay? So we're on page 26, okay? So this is like, I guess this is kind of updated from what you saw last week. We reviewed, this shows you that currently your general fund revenues is at $263,610,705, okay? Which is $15,360, $15,360,000 over and above your recurring revenue in 2021, okay? So it's a 6.2% increase. And then on the bottom of the page, you can see that the 263 compared to the current expense baseline that we have in our budget of 252,974 leaves you excess revenue over your expense. So this is, right now, before you look at any new initiatives, you have the 10.6 million to use. Okay? All right.
That's based on our latest revenue project.
Excuse me?
That is based on what?
That is based on our current baseline expenses
Okay.
that we currently have. No new initiatives, where we get to and look at all the ECCs on the request over and above what the baseline is. And the baseline is currently what they had and approved in FY 2021
Okay.
with some cost changes.
Okay.
Okay? So you're starting off with, you have 10.6 available.
I understand.
Then we go into page 27. This is all your detail revenue. Okay? And it's broken out by your property taxes, income taxes, other taxes, licenses and permits, charges for services on page 28. And there's the detail of your, we'll bring back the detail of the grants when we come back at a future budget work session with we have the grants match that we'll update. All right, page 30, we're getting into expenses now. This is your summary sheet that is consistent on how we have showed it in past years, where we start off and we show in summary version your FY 2020 actual, starting on the left-hand side. Your approved FY 2021. Then we go into what your baseline is, and that baseline is broken out, and again, it's consistent with what your recurring is for each of your departments that were approved in your 2021. Okay? And actually, if you look at the approved 2021 and look at the FY 22 baseline, probably the difference is about $1 million or so. It does remove the non-recurring items that might have been in your FY 2021. Then your next column is your FY 2022 ECC request. Those are your new initiatives, okay? And you can see at the bottom, it totals $19.3 million, okay? The next column is County Administrator Recommended ECC. Yes, we only have one item in there right now. We'll plan on doing more and looking at different recommendations. But the one item that's included right now is the year 3, the final year of your approved county compensation, and that was about $1,024,000 for the county employees.
So that adjustment going forward won't be we won't have the makeup to make anymore as far as the county employees are.
Right.
We'll be at a parity level.
Right. That was based on a study that was done like 3 years ago. It was like an increase of it's like a 3.71% increase for 3 years in a row, which brings us closer to parity with the other jurisdictions. Okay? And then by adding that $1,024,000, you can see that we come now to, so as any ECCs are increased or approved by you, it includes, it brings the total over. It takes the baseline, adds whatever ECC is approved, and gives you the recommended or the budget at this point, okay? So you can see at the bottom, when we add it, it brings you to $253,998,188. Okay? And then if you take the revenue that's on the prior page, that difference is now $9.6 million. And then you'll remember also back in December, for informational purposes, we calculated how much the county merit and county COLA would be. It's a 1% COLA plus the merit increase of, it'd be about $1,170,000. And then that brings you down to $8.4 million available. Okay? So as we move forward and we start making decisions, that difference will be whittled down until, of course, when we get to March 31st or 30, have to look at the calendar, and we have to be balanced. Okay? So this is really the beginning of the operating and decisions that we're starting to make. The blue items that are on here are items of interest. Of course, I already talked about the year 3. The other items that are on here, which we'll be talking about shortly, will be the Board of Education. They're actually the first of the different groups that we'll be talking about. And you can see that they're requesting $6.4 million of recurring funding and $1.9, almost $2 million for non-recurring items, which totals about $8.4 million. Okay? So then on page 31, we go forward, and this is all the detail expenses by department, by division, by type of cost.
Now, let me ask a question, and maybe we'll get it later. Do we know if the legislature's decided to make the Board of Education's whole across the state?
We're going to get to that during the Burford discussion. Not done yet.
What'd you say?
It's not done yet.
So that decision hadn't been made?
We're going to, we can discuss it later as part of the BRFA, the Budget Reconciliation Finance Act.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Then, starting on page 46, Jody's going to go over this, but this is consistent in what you saw last year also. This is our essential cost changes spreadsheet. and it breaks down each of the essential cost changes. So before I continue, Jody, you better take over, because I'll just keep talking. Go ahead.
Well, this spreadsheet's very similar to what Jeanette went over on page 30, so I won't go in too much detail. It is broken out by department division and state agency is the sort order of this. Same columns as on page 30, the approved budget, and then the baseline, which is your 2021 approved minus non-recurring items plus any cost adjustments. The difference here is we detail out the essential cost change request. And if that essential cost change request has an effect on FTE, we'll put that in the FTE column, and then over to the right, we'll add the description of the cost. And then each week when we go over the department or the agency, we'll highlight those in blue. And this worksheet goes from page 46 to 56, so if you'd like to turn to page 55, we can go with the Board of Ed. Right behind these pages, the Board of Ed has submitted 3 essential cost changes. The first one is on page 57, which is $5.9 million for the negotiated agreements. The second item for $519,000 is on page 58. And the third request is a non-recurring cost of just shy of $2 million on page 59.
And at this time, I'd like to invite somebody from the Board of Ed to join us at the table.
Anybody at all.
Anybody?
So we're looking at pages 57, 58, 59?
Yes.
That's correct.
It begins on page 57, and Superintendent Smith is making his way to the table. Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Before we begin to unpack specific things and talk through the request, if you'd indulge me, I did prepare just a little bit that I wanted to say to all of you before we start, if that's okay. It should be, just takes a minute or two.
Is it going to be like one of your graduation speeches?
It'll be as short as, it's a one-pager.
I like it.
Okay. Let me begin by thanking the commissioners for allowing us to present today, to present at the beginning of the annual process of understanding the needs of our community, as well as the resources available to meet them. This is a complex process, and I don't envy the decisions you must make. You often have to weigh one need against another. We are in historic times when seemingly unsolvable problems face us every day, and yet the citizens of St. Mary's County have shown themselves to be the truest leaders, drawing together to find common sense solutions and always navigating a path forward. Before the commissioners this afternoon is a request for an increase in local funding of $6.4 million to meet your school system's recurring needs. These additional funds will go to honor the second year of our 4-year negotiated agreement for our teachers and support staff. This includes a merit step and a 1.75 salary scale adjustment. Our negotiated agreements reflect our commitment to and respect for the people who work every day on behalf of our students. Given the incredible stress the pandemic has placed on our students and staff and school system, we must have competitive compensation to keep the most talented people, both inside and outside, supporting our classrooms. The budget also includes funds to cover incremental increases in healthcare and operational costs, both of which are substantially under market averages. This is due to the engaged and informed employees' dedication to efficiency and shared responsibility. Finally, before our commissioners is a request for additional funding for our bus contractors so they can better compensate drivers and attendants who make sure our students get to school and back home safely each day. In troubled times, nothing can be taken for granted, and we are grateful for all of the support SMCPS has received from our commissioners, our community, our partners, and quite importantly, our parents. The SMCPS 2020 bottom line operating budget represents a 1% increase over the 2021 bottom line operating budget and has no new positions, no new programs, and no new positions, no new programs, and no new initiatives. And so with that, I'm available to answer any questions you may have about our request before you.
Commissioners?
So I'll start. So what's inflation been in the last 3 or 4 years?
Off the top of my head, it has been very low.
Like 1.5%?
Sure.
Thank you. Yet, when I look at your negotiated agreement, you're looking for 4.25%. 2.5 for a step and 1 3/4 for a cost of living adjustment.
Right.
So so without the step, the cost of living adjustment still exceeds the rate of inflation.
And my counter to that would be that you engaged in a compensation study for your employees several years ago, and you are, before us, you've already implemented the year 3, which is a 3.71% market adjustment, a 1% COLA, and a 2.5% step. That's 7.2%. You anticipate giving that to your employees this year. You gave it to them last year, and you gave it to them the year before that. You also addressed the Sheriff's Office corrections staff, giving them a 16% increase last year, and the Sheriff's Office almost a 23% increase. Yes, the negotiated agreement does include a step and a 1.75 salary scale adjustment.
I guess I would just say cautiously is that these salary scale adjustment happened after the negotiated agreement with your salary scale adjustment. So when your salary scale got adjusted, there was significant increases for their pay as well. The timing is different, but, it did happen that way. So ours happened later, yours happened earlier, tomato, tomato, it all happened. The salary scale adjustments went there. So I'm not arguing your point. I'm just saying all the scales were adjusted.
Absolutely. Because we all have incredible employees who are helping us get through the most difficult times, and we need to make sure that they're compensated in such a fashion that they stay with us.
I don't disagree.
I think you're right. We have to work on compensation. And compensation and healthcare are two of the biggest criteria to have any workforce stay stable. And if we look at Kerwin, which, was the legislature overran the governor's veto.
Right.
And we are one of 2 or 3 counties, I think, in the state that meet Kerwin at the present time.
Absolutely.
So to say we have not supported education and funded education based on even the statistics of Kerwin, we're doing pretty good.
You will have no objection from me.
And then I go down the BRFA. So for everyone understands the BRFA, which Commissioner Hewitt brought up. BRFA is a pending legislation in Annapolis called the Budget Reconciliation and Finance Act. And I sit on the Education Subcommittee at MACO this year in addition to the Tax Committee. And what the BRFA basically says is we realize that schools have been harmed due to COVID. And what we want to do is hold schools harmless for the pain that you have endured, for the lack of the number of students you have lost during the year due to them either being homeschooled, going to private schools, or whatever it is along the way. Right. So what the BRFA basically sits there and says is we will hold the public schools harmless for this year as long as you give them maintenance of effort plus $1. And the maintenance of effort plus $1 is then going to translate backwards to a mathematical equation that sits there and says, I have lost, in your case, 500 students, plus or minus, I think about right.
700.
So you're going to take your net number of students today and divide that into the maintenance of effort that exists today plus $1, and you will get a cost per student of, we'll call it X. The problem that MACO is having with the BRFA is that it just doesn't stop at X. It goes into year 2. And in year 2, what the BRFA sits there and says is that we will assume next year that students come back to school. And let's say you pick up your 500 again. And then when it sits there and says you'll then take your net cost per student from the year before and then make that additive to your maintenance of effort. So if let's just say for the sake of discussion that the cost was $10,000 a student, and you pick up you get 500 students back. That would mean that the maintenance of effort cost next year will increase by $5 million based upon the way the law is being constructed now, which means that we can give you maintenance of effort stay plus $1 to get the BRFA credit, but next year you will come back and ask for $5 million plus the negotiated agreement and everything else on top of that. And I'm just struggling, with and I'm not blaming you because you're not writing the law.
Lord knows no.
And the law is being written, but it's the board here who has to accept what the law will be at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And I was looking for a sheet that I got from Mako last year, which we can't seem to find right now, on how many counties last year went with maintenance of effort. And ironically, I believe we're one of the few counties that exceeded maintenance of effort on a scale across the board. So when I look at, the math you've done, I'll give Tammy credit. I mean, geez, you sat down and calculated that we would have, by giving our pay raise, we'd have $8,442,517 left over, and you asked for $8,473,597. You're up by $35,000. Generous, man, generous. Thank you. So I'm asking the questions today based upon what you're asking for, and I understand the needs and the requirements out there, and I understand everybody else's needs that are coming in with, everybody else's budgets. And as I've always said for 11 years, everyone has to be treated fairly, whether it be the sheriff, whether it be you guys, whether it be county employees. It has to be fair across the board.
Right.
And right now, I'm trying to understand fair. With the fact that you want $8 million, the sheriff wants $7 million, so on and so forth across the board. And I mean, there's a pile of requests we got. I mean, it's amazing, when we have COVID, the revenues we are not sure about this time. We're not sure yet about what Annapolis is going to instill upon us. I mean, we've even found a way to tax the internet now to, generate some revenue along the way. And that, again, is, neither here nor there, but it's still a matter of our discussion on where's the money going to come from and how you're going to pay the bill. And as I said this morning, there's going to be pain felt across the board for everybody. And I don't see any other way around. Not having, I don't have an answer today. I just know I'm very concerned with the BRFA says. I am concerned with the funding of Kerwin. I am concerned with the inflation rate and the negotiated agreements. And it just sort of and it's just not the Board of Ed. It's, the one big bucket that the five of us get to deal with.
And I absolutely appreciate that. I will tell you, and we need to be on the record, all the discussions that are going on about holding harmless, that reflects perhaps conversations in other counties, not down here. You have funded above maintenance of effort every single year that I have taken this seat and we've engaged in our conversations. You have made sure each year, after perhaps sometimes bruising budget conversations, that we have enough compensation to honor any negotiated agreement that we entered into with our staff. Our teachers, every single year, and support staff have received their negotiated steps and COLAs per the agreements that were set forth by the Board of Education, and we absolutely positively could not do that without your direct partnership and support. What you have before you this year is what it's going to cost for us to be able to do that. Is there an opportunity to go back and forth and figure things out? Are we still getting information about what money may come down from the state? Those numbers evolve as they go through everything. I will tell you this with Kerwin, not looking forward to it. I think that the one thing we do know is that Kerwin is not necessarily going to compel the state, your agencies, to reconsider the way in which you're funding, as long as you are already in a position where you are adequately funding your school system, which you have been, which is why we find ourselves in the position that we're in today. I will also say that you are a conservative, deliberative body of people. You have set forth that we will have $15 million worth of recurring revenue coming in next year, and you've predicated that on a 3% growth on income tax, even though there is a 6-year average at 5.5%, and it's coming in well above that this year. I understand the importance of doing that, especially since we don't know what comes next. But I will tell you that the greatest investment you can make in a county is in people, is in your people, in the sheriff's people, in the health department, in the emergency management services, and in your public schools. You've got an incredible school system. And you saw this morning that you've got a school system that works with your sheriff's department and with your health officer and does incredible things for all levels of the constituency. I can also tell you that today we had the second day with all of our kids in. Other counties, they might be talking about kids being back in school. We have Head Start kids to seniors. Everybody was in school today. Any child that wanted to attend in person has the opportunity to attend in person in St. Mary's County. And you've done so without a great deal of strife. You've done so without people protesting or picketing, because we have collaboratively worked all the way through, and you have absolutely supported us all the way through in finding the resources to be able to safely open school, including having a health department that worked proactively with us so that every single one of your teachers was vaccinated before the kids came into the building. And I just want to applaud and thank you for that. I know this is going to be a long budget session. I know we're going to have moments when you won't take my phone calls. Perhaps I won't take your phone calls. But at the end, every single year we've been able to get there. We need to be able to get there this year for our people, because our people really deserve it. They have been working so very hard. And I know you have everybody that's come before you've said the same thing, because they really are doing it. So I hear everything you're saying. I present the budget as is presented. We're going to have more information as we go. You're going to have more information as we go. We understand that you have to balance and make some very challenging decisions. I exist and continue to be in the seat. You're a faithful servant ever, and I thank you for the time and the opportunity to go first. So.
Well, I would say this, I agree with you that our human resources are the most valuable. We've had this conversation multiple times, so I do agree with that. I can tell school's back in, not only because it's occupied, but because of the speeding cars that I see everywhere with young drivers.
Yeah.
So that's definitely there. You could notice the difference on the commute this morning.
Yeah.
Of course, they always need to slow down, but
Absolutely.
who does when you're that young? And
Absolutely.
that's it. You know, I've never had a problem with you answering the phone, even after we've gone back and
Better
forth.
moments, yes.
Yeah, so I'd say that it's always been a great working relationship. The thing that always seems to be the impediment is we always get to the end result.
Yeah.
And the board's always voted the way we voted, with all 5 commissioners supporting the school system. I think the problem we have is the misinterpretation of the budget work session and, unfortunately, the union coming in. None of us can control that message. It's unfortunate. We're going to have disagreements. We're going to go back and forth. We're going to say things and have hard words, whatever you want to call it. But the fact is, I don't think anybody up here doesn't support, and that's the message I want to make sure I got ahead of this time, is that we're working together regardless of what you see here. It's just a part of the process, and that's all it is. So there's no negative connotation towards the staff at the schools, the teachers, or anybody else. So I don't want that to be misconstrued in our statements, and especially mine, because I'm especially special at ticking off the teachers.
Yeah.
So I have my own little niche for that, and you know, it's just the way it is. But I just, it's nothing personal. So I support what they do, and I do thank them.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Not at this time.
I got a few.
Sure.
Tell me, MOE through the state is determined by the number of children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've seen different numbers as to the number of kids who aren't attending this year over last year.
Right.
And that number's been 521 or 457 or 1019, but then we get the immunization waivers, then we bring in another 300. It's all over the board. How many kids less this year than last year?
So per the documents that you have in front of you, you show a reduction of 783 students that would be counting for per pupil allocations.
Okay, 783
783
less
is your calculation, yes.
than you had from last year?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. That's more than a total elementary school, if I got down to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the state gives you so much per child.
Yeah.
How much is that?
So I don't have the total off the top of my head, but what the state has done is they have given us, they have brought funding forward that says that the amount of money that we got last year in total, regardless of your enrollment, that's the level of funding that we're receiving this year.
So the state's holding you.
So the state portion, they've already told us, they've come forward and they've said they're going to hold harmless. Now, all the wrangling back and forth with Kerwin and where that all ends up, that still hasn't been all determined as of yet. But the state has simply said, for the 2022 budget year, we are not going to be, and I assume they're going to just not have a PPA calculation. And I'm assuming that when they get done with it, I have seen calculations where they want to do a rolling average for 3 years back and 1 year forecast and average it all out. And again, it's a great deal of, the state is absolutely formula-driven, and then there's multipliers for economically disadvantaged kids and ELL kids and special ed. There's a whole bunch of elements to that. In our county, it really comes down to, what is the money that's needed to meet the needs from year to year? And that's why, although we talk about maintenance of effort, that really has never been the thing that has driven your decision-making with us, and you've always funded us above it. So really what you see before you is what you see before you. I would imagine that before we get done with everything, we'd want to have something in writing that would protect your interest against seeing a gigantic bill come back to you, because although we might be 783 kids fewer attending school, nobody left the county. They are all here. And we have over 1,800 students who are, their parents have elected to homeschool them, so we're not receiving any funding for them. They're homeschooling them completely outside of the school system. There's every indication that if next year we are able to provide them a virtual school, that they may enroll their children in St. Mary's County Public Schools and have an all-virtual attendance option, which would swell our enrollment even beyond what we see here today. So I think that there's so much uncertainty that's moving forward. And I will tell you that if anybody looks to Annapolis or the federal government to solve problems, you're going to be sorely disappointed. If everybody just would have taken a year off, we'd be better off for it. We could
if you had to close everything down, send all your teachers home, no pay.
Yeah, well, I'm saying if everybody just shut everything down in Annapolis.
Yeah, right,
If the legislative, if the
that would be the
legislative
best deal, right? Close legislators down.
didn't happen for a year, I think we'd figure it all out.
2 years would be optimal. I mean,
Yeah, that's where we are. I know that this year was supposed to be the year that they were going to strip down and they wouldn't consider anything that hadn't been, put in earlier. And of course, that is absolutely not what happened. I heard your update this morning. You're following a handful of very close bills to you. There are over 175 education bills that absolutely are going to roll through, and all of them have implications for what other people have to do.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to wait and see what they do, but I will tell you that it won't have any impact on our relationship, because it's really just going to be.
I do have a question about all the money that we now spent the past year, especially on getting the infrastructure put in place for internet access, et cetera.
Yeah.
Do you see a larger impact? You just mentioned about 1,800 possible.
Yeah.
So do you see another department coming in your educational system for virtual learning?
I do. And
So, I mean, and a lot of these people just keep their kids at home. I mean, I got a niece that's a senior at Leonardtown who's a straight-A student.
Yeah.
She could care less about going back to school or not.
Right.
And maybe she's still home. I don't know if she went back or not.
Yeah.
But she was like, she didn't really care if she went back to not. She was doing fine.
Yeah.
Because she was able to adopt that computer and that home learning. And she's done well.
Yeah.
And so do you see a possible change? I mean, would this be cost effective to have more virtual learning?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it'll be a much larger conversation when we're talking, like this year we were supposed to be bringing in an outside consultant to talk about redistricting and how we balance things, because we don't have a middle school or a high school on the horizon, and both our middle schools and high schools middle schools in particular, they're rated capacity and they're running fine. In the high school, so we were supposed to do a study anyway. I think there's every indication that when we get to the other side of this, there are going to be a lot of people who opt to non-traditionally attend secondary schools, or only come in a couple of days a week, or come to one center and get all their instruction there. On one hand, it's going to be very unsettling because it'll be new, but on the other hand, I think it'll be a great way to deliver service to people who don't necessarily want to attend a traditional, comprehensive high school or middle school.
So Dr. Smith, right now, it's fitting you would come the week that all the students have the ability to go back to school.
Timed it.
How many students opted to go back in? Do you know percentage-wise? Because my sister tells me in her class it's about 20%.
Yeah. Well, so, and that might be what she's looking at. So 100% of kids, right? Between 70 and 75% of students said they wanted to come back to school, all right? So you've got about 75, let's say 70% for simple math, 70% of kids said they want to come back to school. And then we divide them in half by hybrid, so it's 35 and 35.
Okay.
So if you have a class of, 30 kids, you're down to 20, then you're down to 10. And I will tell you that last week in particular, this week it's building. There were several people who kind of waited it out. Their parents, the kids said they were coming back, and they haven't come back. We have, I will tell you right now, I have 98% attendance with our instructional staff, so they're all there. Our schools are going to wait till the end of the week, and I'm going to see what the attendance numbers are, but it definitely looks like some kids we're waiting to see what the first couple of days look like. They're still attending online. We now have 4 attendance codes. There's in-person, there's in-person virtual, meaning they were supposed to be in person, but they chose not to, and they were absent. Or there's virtual, straight virtual. They were going to be virtual, they're virtual, or absent. They were supposed to be there, they were virtual, they didn't log in at all. So now we have 4 new absentee codes that we're tracking. So.
I think it's interesting, though, with the learning system, we come sort of full circle. If you remember back, years ago, you would get out of school early because you had to farm.
Right.
And you didn't go to school every single day of the week, and especially during time to pull the crops in. And now you're all virtual learning in the technological age, and you can go to school and maybe come in 1 or 2 days a week, and you get the rest of the virtual, and you could be doing your vocational or farming, or it's just interesting.
The implications for the career technology education program and internships are really, and a lot of those, all the kids are back in because they've been itching to get back and actually put their hands on things and be involved. But the thought for next year being able to have them come in for a period of time and then work independently in internships or apprenticeships and out in the workforce and then do virtual check-in is, that's all this stuff's kind of exciting. Believe it or not, this is actually, if you can get aside from all the stress and trauma that's going on, this may very well be the most transformative time public education has ever seen in the United States.
Now, there's something else going on in Annapolis, too, talking about additional funding for summertime.
Yeah.
Because of the huge failure rate in some school systems.
And so
I'm just wondering how are we doing in right now and looking at our students? Are they making the grade, or are we going to have a large?
We're definitely going to have a lot of kids accessing a summer program.
Okay.
But I don't know why Annapolis is taking this up at all. ESSER II, the second ESSER II grants, this gigantic sum of money, has already been allocated to school systems, and that money is specifically for summer programming. So
they're talking about. I'm not saying there's been.
Yeah. Oh no. But
I'm not saying more money coming.
But they're talking about securing more state money when we don't need it. We have federal money. It's already been allocated.
Right.
It's over $11 million for the school system. We're going to have the most robust summer programs that we've ever had in the county, and it's not going to cost you any money. It's not going to cost the state any money. It's already in the buckets of trillions of dollars that the federal government has.
Now, next question is, are you going to have the employees coming back to do this?
I believe so, because
You think most of the teachers are going to sign up for it?
I believe so. Well, we have our teachers are back in school, and they really want to work with kids, and they want to make sure the kids are successful. So I think they're going to sign on for summer, and it's also an opportunity for them to make $30 an hour.
Extra money, sure.
Which is,
How does that affect transportation?
We're going to, with $11 million for summer school, we're going to be able to pay for transportation throughout the entire summer. So our contractors are going to make additional money as well as our drivers, because they're going to be driving kids all through the summer. So there will be an opportunity for everybody to kind of right bubble for, lost funds over the last year.
Good.
Again, it's exciting times.
Okay, let me get back to, you were down 718 kids. Now,
Whatever that number was.
I think he said 783. I thought he said.
well, it said, I wrote down 718. Is it 783 now?
That's what I heard.
Okay,
It's from your, I went with what you've presented in your, it's in your
All right, well,
packet.
here's where I'm going. I'm trying to build a budget. I'm trying to understand. So one time we talked about you could have a drop in state MOE of 2.5 million, which could drop you down to about 104.
Right.
Because there were 106 and some change, and you're no longer
No,
anticipating.
that the original proposed budget in December has been amended to reflect the fact that the state held us harmless, and put that money back in.
Okay, so what you'll have is this many less children, but you'll be getting the same money if you had them.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the next thing is you're asking the county to come up with another, about 6 million or so
Right.
additional over the 109
Right.
we gave you last year. So that's, you want us to go to about 116.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And the state will be at 106,
Yeah.
and the county will be at 116. And you got 783 or 18 or whatever the number is, less kids. Now, have you looked at, when you say student enrollment, what we've seen over the last several pre-COVID years was enrollment was pretty flat.
Yes.
It tended maybe 100, if that,
Yes.
but usually in the double digits, not triple. And so the point was, is enrollment was flat. So someone could say, why is enrollment flat if we had live births 6 years ago of, for instance, 100 kids? 6 years later, we should have 100 kids going in kindergarten or first grade or whatever grade they're going. But we're not getting it. So the point is, where they're going is they're going to parochial.
Yes, they are.
Some to home, but I think the homeschooling is getting a little tough, especially if someone needs to telework.
Right.
And that environment. So where I'm going with this is to say that you lost kids, you said you lost 200 kids in kindergarten alone because kindergartners didn't do well for virtual learning. Is that true?
More or less, yeah. People did not enroll their children in kindergarten.
And what you're doing is you're expecting them next year to get them.
Absolutely.
But can you say why it happens, why these parochial schools who have been going a whole year
Right.
and haven't had to deal with the virtual and the stuff that public has to do, it just, my opinion is their enrollment's going up. And the good news is, hey, look, people pay that. People send their kids to parochial schools, private schools. They're still paying their school tax. They're still
Right.
getting that school tax.
Right.
So the next thing gets to be, there's nothing in here about your fund balance going forward. We've got 8 months of this year under our belt now, and you just started in school
Right.
learning again. Now, you don't put any numbers in there for what you project to be a fund balance. Do you project the fund balance this year?
We will have funds coming back to the system, quite probably through healthcare rebates. We don't know what those rebates will be, but we know that we will have healthcare rebates as you'll have healthcare rebates. We are following and tracking all of our expenses this year. Although we have had an interrupted in-person schooling, we have carried all the costs because we didn't shut down buildings, we didn't lay off staff, we kept paying everybody through this entire time period. Not one person has missed payment or employment. They've been able to maintain and work with us. So we will be able to forecast a little bit better as we move into the fourth quarter of the year, where we are, where we're up. And chances are, before we get to the end of this, if we anticipate fund balance being available, then we would put it towards non-recurring expenses in the 2022 school year. So as of right now, in the proposal that you see before us, we ask you for $2 million worth of your fund balance. In all likelihood, if we look like we're going to project a similar fund balance, then we could assume that cost. Because the one thing we do know is that technology costs money. Technology is disposable, or at least children treat it as disposable. So we are going to be spending money for technology replacement for the 2022-2023 school year.
Okay, so you don't anticipate using any of your fund balance for this year coming in?
So right now, we are using every single bit of our unallocated fund balance this year.
Well, you only had
Absolutely.
80,000 unassigned. You had 16 million, of which you turned around and signed 12 million or so?
Yeah,
I mean, I think you got it. Whether it's assigned or unassigned, and of course.
Oh, no. We could talk through the fund balance. I mean, so we set aside a larger amount of money for our healthcare call because we just didn't know. I mean, it's broken out. I could have Ms. McCourt come out and speak to it specifically. And we did. This budget that we're currently in, the reason why it's only a 1% increase, but it's $6 million ask to you, is that in this budget, we're using $6 million worth of fund balance left over from last year. So that money is allocated. And we'll get to the end of.
But you increased your healthcare call by $2.6 million.
Absolutely. Because we just didn't know, because we only put as a placeholder a 5% growth in healthcare, and we didn't know where we'd end up. We had money left over in healthcare because, of course, people weren't going out they weren't receiving services, they weren't receiving medical treatments, they weren't doing the scheduled things that they needed to do. So we put more money aside because we certainly didn't want to end up at the end of the year saying, we're going to miss our call. As of right now, we've been tracking our healthcare, as you've been tracking your healthcare. We're a little over, but we're within where we think we'll be. We're going to be, I think we're going to end up in good shape. Certainly, as we get closer into the fourth quarter, we can come back and speak very detailedly about that. And any kind of an update you would like to have on that and a breakout, we would be more than happy to send that over.
Well, I think what I'm saying is your healthcare call could be reduced.
I believe at the end of this year, if we have a successful year and we get to that is something that could be examined.
It's a factor in
I don't think we need to carry $6.6 million, whatever we have in our current call.
All right, well, let me touch the touchy subject. Okay, when you have 718 or 83 or whatever the number of less kids,
Right.
It's reasonable to think if you have one teacher for every 25 children,
Right.
there's potential for 30 less teachers there, 25 to 30 less teachers. But have you seen any savings in instructional salaries?
Well, and absolutely not, because what we've been compelled to do is actually take our 30 kids, and one teacher teaching 30 kids can't teach 30 kids anymore. It's got to be broken up into two different sections and oftentimes in two different spaces. So we are absolutely using all of the staff that we have. I do believe that the students are going to come roaring back in for next year, but if they don't, what we'll end up having is we'll have slightly reduced class size. So instead of 27 kids in a classroom, we might only have 24. Spread across the system, that's kind of where we are. That's why this whole idea of a PPE year to year, one kid comes in, you get $6,000, one kid leaves, you take $6,000 back. It doesn't really ever work out like that. To scale for very large systems, for a Howard County or a Montgomery County, at that level, I guess they have such large numbers that they're working with they can make those shifts. But as we get smaller and smaller, it's so much more difficult to do. We have not cut staff. We haven't talked about cutting staff. Within the budget that's before you, if you were to go with maintenance of effort, we would have to talk about cutting staff.
Well, that's what I guess I would ask, is that you could show us at some point in time what a budget would look like with a maintenance of effort.
Oh, sure. I mean, we could certainly do that.
And I'm sure you'll make it a bloodbath for
Well, I mean, no, I mean,
popular
it would
things
be,
that
it would be
you know,
by,
cannot do without.
it would be by, no, we wouldn't do that. I'm not saying that, no, we wouldn't do that. What we'd show you is that how many positions we would have to reduce to meet that budget as set forward. So that's what we could present for you. I don't think that, as an exercise, sure, we could do that. Do I think for 1 second that you would ever cut the school budget when we weren't looking at some kind of a cliff for revenue coming in and things like that? That's just something that would obviously get people on Facebook, Commissioner O'Connor, and we'd be, we'd be feeding that angst machine. But we never considered that. We never considered that.
But again, I think you need to understand, I think Commissioner Morgan made the point, there's only so much money to be had. And it's like you're asking for all of it. And there's nothing for anybody else.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back and say you have
I'm glad you came first.
$15 million worth of new recurring money. We're asking for 6.4. Okay, so that's like 36% of all the new revenue coming in.
No, we're talking $8 million in new revenue.
$8 million is after you factor in your market adjustment and your step and COLA for your staff and some other things, as well as some of the the bond financing money, there's a lot to unpack. You have over $15 million worth of new revenue coming in based on a very conservative 3% income tax increase. If you actually do your pro forma that you currently are, you probably have over $20 million worth of new money. We are asking for more than we are owed, more than you are obligated to give us, but it is an appropriate portion of new revenue coming in.
What do you mean you're owed more than we're obligated? What do you mean by that?
You would be funding us more than we are owed. Maintenance of effort is what
you're owed. Maintenance of effort is what you're owed.
Is what we are owed, yes.
Yes.
And we are asking for more than we are owed. And I up front, I want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Well, I think vernacular is very careful here, and last year I found it and I went back, but maintenance of effort would be the funding level that is there in order to maintain what you have, right?
No. Maintenance of effort is a per pupil calculation based on enrollment regardless of what your operational costs.
Okay, all right.
So and it works out to be a budget cut, and it would have been a budget cut last year. It would be a budget cut this year. So
But this is excluding steps, COLAs, and everything with the maintenance of effort.
yeah, well, there is no maintenance of effort is flat funding. So maintenance of effort.
That's my point.
Yeah, maintenance of effort.
If it's flat funded, you don't have to cut anything.
Well, assuming that everything stays the same. That your healthcare doesn't go up, and your operational costs don't go up, and your children's needs don't go up, and your technology resources don't go up. It's flat funding. And as far as I know, I've never seen a flat funded budget in St. Mary's County history.
No, but the reason I'm making that point is because when we use terms of cut the budget, we have proposed budgets, just like the sheriff's office is asking for a proposed budget of $6 million. So I would expect that when they come in, they're not going to say, if we don't give them $6 million, we're cutting their budget. Because cutting the budget is saying, we're going to cut your already existing funding. That is your budget. This is a budget request. So if we want to cut the budget request, that's a different term than cutting the budget.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Because what happens in the newspapers and what happens every place else is the commissioner said they're going to cut our budget. No, we're not. We can't. Right. Maintenance of effort is maintenance of effort, flat funding. We can't go below that. There's a difference between that and cutting a budget request.
Absolutely.
So I want to be clear this year, because last year I watched it go woof off the page, and I was like, whoa, we're not cutting a budget.
Right.
You know, and it's the same thing. If the sheriff's office has $36 million and they're asking for 6 and they walk out of here with 36, their budget's flat. It's the same. They didn't get a budget cut. Their request just didn't get met. Yes. But I think it's important that we're very clear on those words. But
absolutely.
To your healthcare point, I think it's very cautious and it's probably wise. And while I would like to see them, of course, I would love to see that money be used elsewhere, you can't. The reason I don't think you can is looking at the pool. If I'm looking at the pool from the healthcare side that I deal with on the legit board, we are preparing for the inevitable. The inevitable being COVID's going to get lifted.
Right, there is a pent-up. Yeah.
The people are going to start going to the doctor in record numbers.
Yes.
All the procedures that have been extended out that didn't fall within that renewal where we were able to give $550,000 of credits back, if not more, is not going to be there because we're going to have, basically the plan's going to overperform.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at, how do we handle this? So that money is being set aside, looking at the investments, what's the return on those investments, how are we going to do this, how is it going to affect the pool? So while you're setting that money aside, I think it's, even though it's out of this FY, I do see why that would be logical to do, based on the fact that if your plan gets wrecked as soon as people come out of COVID, you're going to be in a bad place.
Well, the last thing I'd want to do is have to come before you within a budget cycle and tell you that I do not have enough money to meet my health care nor my payroll.
Yeah, I think that would be going
I remember
back
that
to
happened
history.
about
Yes.
7 or 8 years ago.
And politely, that's how you got me.
It was very, very bad. That was very
trust
bad.
me.
Yes, we all do. And
Very
again,
bad.
That's how you
People
got me.
make mistakes.
That's how you got me. So, and I'm glad to be here. Is there anything else, gentlemen?
I think we were going to have to be patient, watch the BRFA, watch Annapolis, and realize this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. It was
All right,
very
thank
good
you.
work. Very good presentation.
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
And again, as you go forward, please work through, with Ms. Cudmore and with Ms. McCourt, any information that you need from us, any clarification, we will gladly provide anything that you're looking for. We want to make sure that we have an absolute understanding of where we are and why we're asking for what we're asking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
We don't have any decision on this right now today, do we?
No, just any direction you wanted to provide to us, we would take.
Okay.
If not, we will take it at another time when you're ready to make direction.
I'd like to see a little bit more rollout of what's coming with this stimulus money. We're got an email that we could get $22 million, and if we did, obviously, some of this, non-reoccurring costs could be
Right.
picked up over there.
Okay,
Let's wait until a little bit more of this onion gets unpeeled.
sure, absolutely. Well, Commissioners, that's all I have to present to you today. I thank you for approving the CIP changes. Those changes will now be taken to the Planning Commission on Monday night.
Okay.
And also, we will start processing the reimbursement of the recordation tax to the fire and rescue. We'll also be reviewing the recordation tax ordinance to see where that can be amended and work with legal. And then we'll come back with more info on the retiree health for elected officials,
Okay.
for other employees, and also on more info on the veteran disability tax credit.
When you send out that reimbursement check, can you include a letter from the commissioners of some sort?
Sure.
Like the commissioners voted on it, this date and time, there's the, this is why you're
Guarantee
getting.
they're going to be pinned up, they're paying attention.
Well, either way, just so they can have it, so it's not like a check in the mail.
Right.
We'll ask Commissioner Guy to sign some
Not a
letters.
problem. I'll draft a letter,
Thank you.
have all the commissioners sign it. Or I'll sign it.
We'll
This
put
way,
it on
this
your-
way,
don't
they
matter.
have written documentation beyond the video in the future that this did exist for recordation tax. They can present it.
And we're
say,
hoping
"See, I
that
told
our
you so."
delegation will change the law so we don't have to charge them anymore.
Right,
Right.
right. So we'll have to amend the ordinance and
Amend the ordinance,
determine
do that, too.
what
You're going to be
needs
able
to
to get
go
that in
to.
this year.
Excuse me?
No
You'll be
way.
able to get done this year,
No.
Right.
because you already passed
I thought we
rules,
had
and
asked
rules
them to do
not
that
going to accept
already.
it.
Right.
Yeah, we did, but
They were too interested in
I
changing
think
the
we
way.
had a legal analysis,
Sneak
whether it was
legislation.
state or local. That's what
Might call
Jeanette's
it.
describing.
Right.
So we'll follow up on
We'll
that.
follow
Okay,
up on
appreciate
that,
it.
determine
Appreciate it.
what needs to be done and what the next steps
Okay,
are.
appreciate that.
All right.
So the two things taken back is health insurance for elected officials and veterans tax credit.
Yes, we'll bring those
Right.
back as
Okay.
follow-up. And then next week, next Tuesday, every week, we'll be talking about the follow-up and the elected official request.
Okay. Anything else, Commissioners? To give to our CFO, or? Thank you all very much, and this closes our budget work session for March 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you.